Gran Torino. Walt Kowalski stands stone-faced at his wife Dorothy's funeral, watching his granddaughter Ashley fidget through the service in a belly shirt and miniskirt, like she's headed to spring break instead of saying goodbye to her grandmother. His adult sons shuffle around, making small talk, already resigned to the fact that nothing they do will ever satisfy the old man. Dorothy was the only person who truly understood Walt, and now she's gone, leaving him alone in a world that feels increasingly foreign. The wake continues at Walt's house, but he escapes to his garage, where he finds Ashley sneaking a cigarette. She's eyeing his prized possession, a pristine 1972 Ford Gran Torino, and casually asks what'll happen to the car when he dies. Walt doesn't dignify her with an answer. This machine represents everything he values: American craftsmanship, honest work, and a time when things made sense. Father Janovich, barely old enough to shave, approaches Walt with Dorothy's dying wish that he look after her husband and convince him to make his first confession. Walt brushes off the young priest with brutal efficiency. He's not about to bare his soul to some kid who's never faced real hardship, someone whose biggest challenge was probably choosing between seminary schools. Next door, the Vanglore family represents everything Walt thinks is wrong with his neighborhood. These Hmong immigrants practice what he considers barbaric rituals, and their presence reminds him daily that his slice of American suburbia is disappearing. The teenage son Thao gets bullied by Latino gangsters on the street until his cousin Spider's Asian gang shows up to drive them off. But Spider isn't playing hero. He wants Thao to join his crew, and when the shy kid refuses, the pressure starts building. Spider corners Thao at home, demanding he prove himself by stealing the old man's Gran Torino. It's the perfect initiation. Humiliate the racist neighbor and score a valuable ride in one move. That night, Thao creeps into Walt's garage, but the old Korean War veteran's instincts kick in. Walt appears with his rifle, ready to put a permanent end to the break-in. But in the darkness and confusion, Thao escapes into the night. The next day brings another disappointment when Walt's eldest son calls, not to check on his grieving father, but to ask about Dorothy's jewelry. Walt hangs up in disgust. His own flesh and blood treats him like an inconvenience, while strangers plot against him from next door. When Spider returns to force Thao's hand, the entire Vanglore family erupts in protest. The shouting match spills onto Walt's sacred lawn, triggering something primal in the old man. He storms outside with his rifle, and his deadly serious demeanor sends Spider's crew scrambling. For the first time in years, Walt feels useful, even if he didn't intend to help anyone. The grateful family floods his porch with traditional foods and flowers. But Walt tosses everything in the trash. He doesn't want their gratitude or their foreign customs cluttering his American lawn. When Thao's mother insists her son work for Walt as penance for the attempted theft, the old man reluctantly agrees, more curious than generous. Meanwhile, Sue, Thao's confident older sister, gets cornered by street punks while walking with her timid boyfriend. Walt happens to drive by and notices the trouble. He casually reaches for what looks like a gun, and the thugs laugh at the old fool until he actually pulls out a real pistol. The mood shifts instantly, and Walt drives Sue home while she explains how her family fled Laos after fighting alongside Americans in Vietnam, only to be abandoned when the war ended. Walt begins noticing things about Thao that remind him of himself at that age. The kid helps elderly neighbors while other young men stand around doing nothing. When Walt's own family visits for his birthday, with condescending gifts like a phone with giant buttons and suggestions about nursing homes, he throws them out of his house. These people share his blood but understand nothing about him. Sue invites Walt to a family barbecue, and despite his reservations, he shows up. The Hmong grandmother glares at him with the same intensity he's been directing at them, creating a perfect standoff of mutual suspicion. A family shaman studies Walt intently, eventually telling him he carries the weight of things he's done in war, things that won't let him find peace. The observation hits too close to home, and Walt retreats to the bathroom where he coughs up blood, a secret he keeps from everyone. Walt starts putting Thao to work around the neighborhood, teaching him practical skills and something resembling confidence. The kid has never had a proper male role model, and Walt finds himself genuinely invested in turning this soft boy into someone who can survive in America. He takes Thao to his barber shop, where Martin gives the kid a crash course in masculine banter and self-respect. When Walt arranges a construction job for Thao through an old friend, the young man impresses the foreman and gets hired on the spot. Walt buys him a tool belt, a simple gesture that means everything to someone who's never owned anything of value. For a brief moment, it seems like Walt has found purpose in his final years. But Spider hasn't forgotten the disrespect. His gang jumps Thao after work, beating him bloody and burning a cigarette into his cheek before destroying his new tools. Walt tracks down one of the attackers and delivers his own brand of justice, warning them to stay away from the boy. The message seems clear enough. That night, Thao works up the courage to ask out Yua, a girl he's been admiring, and Walt proudly offers his Gran Torino for their first date. The old man's most treasured possession becomes a symbol of trust and hope for the future. But the gang isn't finished. They spray Thao's house with bullets, leaving him with a minor neck wound but sending a much larger message. When Sue doesn't come home that night, the family's worst fears are realized. She stumbles back hours later, beaten and violated, another casualty in a war she never chose to fight. Walt retreats to his house and destroys everything within reach, his hands bleeding from punching walls and breaking glass. The guilt overwhelms him. His interference escalated this violence, and an innocent girl paid the price. Father Janovich finds Walt that night, and for the first time, the young priest's anger matches the old man's. They both want justice, but the family won't talk to the police, and the cycle of violence will continue unless someone breaks it permanently. Walt spends his last day putting his affairs in order. He gets a haircut, buys a new suit, and finally enters the confessional booth. His sins are brief but heavy. He failed as a father, lost touch with his sons, and carries the weight of men he killed in Korea. When Janovich tells him to go in peace, Walt responds simply, "I am at peace." That evening, Walt gives Thao his silver star from Korea and shares the truth about how he earned it. He gunned down a terrified young enemy soldier who was trying to surrender, a moment that haunts him decades later. As Thao processes this confession, Walt locks him in the basement. The kid pounds on the door and screams, but Walt won't let him carry the burden of taking another person's life. Walt walks alone to Spider's headquarters as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the street where neighbors peek through curtains, sensing something momentous is about to happen. The gang waits with weapons drawn, cocky and eager for violence, thinking they're about to teach the old racist a final lesson. Walt stands in the middle of the street like an Old West gunfighter, completely calm as he lights a cigarette with deliberate slowness. He taunts them about hitting his little friend Sue, his voice carrying across the silence, making it clear he's not backing down or begging for mercy. The tension builds as everyone realizes this is heading toward bloodshed. When Walt reaches into his jacket, the movement is slow and theatrical, giving the gang plenty of time to assume he's drawing a gun. They open fire immediately, pumping dozens of bullets into the old man's body with the fury of young men who mistake violence for power. As Walt falls to the pavement, his hand opens to reveal not a weapon, but a simple Zippo lighter, the same one he used for his cigarette moments before. He dies completely unarmed, witnessed by neighbors who will testify that Spider's crew murdered an innocent old man in cold blood. His sacrifice is calculated and brilliant. He puts the entire gang behind bars while ending their reign of terror in the neighborhood, all without firing a single shot or compromising his own moral code. At Walt's funeral, the Hmong community arrives in full traditional dress to honor the man who stood with them when it mattered most, filling the church with colors and ceremonies that would have annoyed Walt just months earlier. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The racist old man is being mourned by the very people he once despised, while his biological family sits in uncomfortable silence. The reading of his will delivers the final shock. His sons and grandchildren inherit absolutely nothing. The house goes to the church as Dorothy would have wanted, but the Gran Torino, that symbol of American pride and craftsmanship, Walt's most treasured possession, goes to Thao, along with strict instructions not to add any ridiculous flames or modifications. The film ends with Thao driving Walt's beloved car down the same streets where this unlikely friendship began, with Daisy, the old man's loyal dog, riding shotgun like a furry guardian angel. Walt found the family he never had in the people he initially despised, while they found the protector they desperately needed in the most unexpected place. Sometimes understanding comes not from words or shared blood, but from someone willing to sacrifice everything for strangers who become family. In death, Walt achieved what had eluded him in life. He became the father figure he never was to his own sons, and found peace in knowing that his final act created a better world for the people who mattered most. Thanks for watching till the end. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring more awesome stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay tuned for the next movie on Addict Recap.